Hey everyone, I'm going to look at 3 decades of robot design with these 3 specific toys, and by now you've probably seen the Lilliput video, the Atomic Robot Man video, and perhaps even the Dome easel back. That is also an original box, as I pointed out previously, and I find it interesting that we have a robot from the 1930s, the only one from the 1930s, the only robot from the 1940s, late 40s, and one of the many robots from the 1950s. So if you watched my Lilliput video, you would have noticed that I did allude to the fact that things that carried over for decades and decades to follow were the rivets, the block head, the squarish body, the sharp angles. And from just a mechanical point of view, from a toy perspective, right? These are all basically various pin walkers. I mean, he doesn't have pins, but it does in a sense. The easels back here, right? They serve as his pins. So he's a pin walker by default, cheating. Using the stabilizing easel back. Because the other ones would be probably, if I'm not mistaken, actual pin walkers with pin in their feet. But if he's not a specific pin walker, he's a pin walker by action, by the motion of the action. So anyway, the other carryovers, right? We had the analog dials, and you have analog dials in the 30s, you have it in the 40s, and you have it over here, and you still had it in the 50s. What became, I think, more popular, I think this is, it's not like we didn't have mechanizations up the wazoo by 1938, but you had a lot more gears and piston action showing by the 50s, which wasn't as common. It was still kind of like, up until the 30s and 40s, these were just almost still like the welded, boilerplate style. Or boiler, like a boiler with a head on it. They still went with that theme. Not as much gears, let's say, but that changed by the 1950s. And the box, though, on this particular one still isn't that spacey. So the other thing that carried over, you have the block head. Now, and over here you have a cylindrical head, which is kind of unusual. But you did have the cylindrical head also in the 50s, and like the R35 robot. But when you look at the dome, right, it's kind of deceiving. You have a block head with rounded corners. So they still managed to keep the block head. The block head was kept, all the way through probably the late 70s, early 80s, until they went with the plastic robots where the molds started getting a little wacky, the rivets disappeared. And you think about it, right? The plastics were glued or screwed. They just didn't have the need for the rivets then by that point. That wasn't part of the design element. The dome was just kind of an added feature, kind of superfluous, right? You didn't really need it. And then the arms, you had these claws. And the claws really have still endured. A lot of the robots today that have, maybe like a pickup ability to grab something, they still utilize the claw. I think the claw is kind of a de facto hand, and I don't know that there's much you can do. That pretty much most of the robotic toys will have a claw of some type. And that's really it. They still kept, obviously, the humanoid appearance, the 2 eyes, the nose, and the mouth. As you can see, all of these have, a rectangular mouth and 2 eyes and a nose, and legs, and feet. So I just thought it was an interesting kind of peek into how, as different as they are, they really, essentially at its core, they retain a lot of the same design elements that started all the way with this guy in 1938. And that's why he was so influential. Anyway, that's my opinion. What's yours? I'd like to know. If you have an opinion, leave it, and I will be sure to respond. Don't forget to thumb up the video, leave any likes or remarks. And with that, I'll talk to you later.